Oh, it's over. What a beautiful sequel. And it gave birth to the career of James Cameron, out of all people. Oh, I feel exhausted. Well, I guess it's time to go back to work. Not that I really want to. I'd rather actually just talk about sequels. Namely, a James Cameron sequel. Aliens!
I was watching a recent video by Rob Ager on his Collative Learning channel about James Cameron's sequel, Aliens. He was discussing how that film triumphs by not succumbing to the quote, remake disguised as a sequel trap.
James Cameron and his writing partner on Aliens, Gaylan Head, who was also his wife and the producer of the film, they were wise enough not to fall into the remake disguised as a sequel trap. So their film does what a true sequel should. It treats the first film as an opening act and it continues the story, taking it into new territory.
This was the catalyst for me to make this video. I've been wanting to highlight this certain detail about sequels for some time, but I didn't quite know how to tackle it until I watched Rob's video. Now, I'm a huge fan of Rob's channel and I highly recommend you subscribe and enjoy his content, because I do a lot. It's fantastic. But on the point that he brings up here, I think he's missed the mark. Obviously, there are sequels out there which completely deviate from the structure of repeating set pieces or plot points from the original. Empire Strikes Back or The Dark Knight being major examples of this. However, some of the most celebrated sequels like Aliens are in fact remakes disguised as sequels to a certain degree. Now, before I dive in, I must say that there will be an element of boiling down the movies to get to the level which reveals the remake qualities to them, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that sequels that repeat elements from previous movies are a bad thing. Quite the opposite. It is merely to highlight how most sequels will repeat popular set pieces or story beats but convince audiences that these situations can happen again in the canon by changing the context around them. Or recontextualizing, as a simpler way of putting it, the recontextualized sequel. I'm also not saying that these sequels are one-for-one remakes. Obviously the change in context makes that not possible, but they do remake set pieces that take the audience on the same ride that they've been on before. Sometimes this can be painfully obvious, like in the case of 2011's The Thing, or not so much as with sequels like Aliens. And on that note, let's start with addressing James Cameron's sequel. Alien and its sequel Aliens both start with their key characters waking up from hypersleep after travelling to LV-426 to investigate a strange signal or lack of signal in Aliens.
Like what?
Seems she has intercepted a transmission of unknown origin. She got us up to check it out.
A transmission? Out here?
Ripley, we have to talk. They've lost contact with the colony on LV-426.
Aliens even goes so far as to repeat the slow camera pans through the Sulaco ship, similar to the opening of Alien. Now, some of you are already thinking, well, the scene in Aliens happens much farther into the movie than Alien, which is true, but as mentioned, in order to help convince the audience to watch the same thing again, they've changed the context of how we get there by having a totally new opening building up to it. The use of particular props even plays a part in the retelling of similar story beats to Alien. In Ridley Scott's movie, the character of Ash cobbles together a rudimentary motion tracker that pinpoints the location of the alien on a simple display. In Aliens, the Marines have the use of that tech, but it's updated to fit the time. It takes the tense scene of Lambert watching the alien stalk Dallas from afar and ups the ante to have each Marine carry one, so they can constantly see the horde of aliens closing in on them. We get this moment involving the character Bishop inspecting a dead facehugger, which emulates the scene where Ash does the same in the original. Although this time it's a red herring to make audiences believe Bishop is also going to be a villain. We get the reveal of Burke's motives, who is actively working against the interest of the others like Ash was, and even when Ripley and Newt are fleeing the Queen Alien, we get this music cue from the original film.
Hold on to me! expires in T-minus 3 minutes.
And also what is interesting about this sequence where Ripley goes to the alien hive to save Newt is they also have a very subtle moment when they redo how Ripley cautiously looks around a corner. Check it out.
Expires in T-minus 3 minutes.
The most glaring example of how Aliens remakes Alien is the third act. Both films end with an impending explosion that threatens to destroy everything and everyone. In Alien, it's the emergency destruct sequence that Ripley puts in place to try and kill the alien. In Aliens, it's after a dropship crashes into the power plant's cooling system, causing the entire facility to become a ticking time bomb. After narrowly escaping the explosion in both movies, Ripley believes the alien menace is completely destroyed. However, both films have the beast return for a fourth act, which forces Ripley to retreat to a wardrobe in Alien and a cargo hold in Aliens. Again, in both films, she suits up to confront the alien. In the original, it's a spacesuit, and in Aliens, she gets into a power loader. And after some intense moments, she manages to blast the alien into space. As mentioned before, this is boiling things down to a certain degree, but it shows how statements like the one Rob placed on Aliens don't exactly ring true. The truth for the structure of Aliens, and many other sequels like it, lies somewhere between a full remake and a totally new sequel, leaning more towards the latter. But let's take a look at some other examples to emphasize this idea of recontextualized sequels. Now, if the context is not changed sufficiently enough, then a sequel will just be a remake, even if new ideas exist in the movie later on. A great example of this is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Everyone and their grandmother have made the connection between the plot of The Force Awakens and the original 1977 Star Wars. For many like myself, it made me dislike the movie a lot for its unoriginal plot involving yet another Death Star that needed to be destroyed. Obviously there was some other subplots in the movie that were new ideas for a Star Wars film, but in order for those to feel like they belong as part of the narrative going forward, the context for the main threat of the movie needed to be efficiently explored, but it was not. The opening scene of The Force Awakens duplicates what's seen in Star Wars. A character hides vital information inside a droid which is sent off into a desert for hiding. A group of stormtroopers and a villain dressed in black turns up to interrogate the character about the location of the information that was hidden. Had this scene in The Force Awakens happened later in the movie, after establishing characters and the state of the Star Wars universe post Return of the Jedi, I don't think anyone would have minded the remake qualities too much, akin to how Aliens approached remaking the opening scene from Alien later on in the movie. But The Force Awakens places this scene as the opening scene, so without any context, The Force Awakens just starts by remaking Star Wars, with no warning and really no justification, as another way of putting it. Return of the Jedi set up the fall of the Empire, but at the start of The Force Awakens they're just back with a new name and some new designs. The only context we're given for this was a line of dialogue stating,
"The First Order rose from the dark side. You did not."
Which made little to no sense without the proper context. For me, seeing this in the cinema back in 2015 killed any excitement I had about the events that followed this scene. I wasn't convinced that these events could happen again because they had not taken the time to convince me otherwise. And, as we all know now, the two sequels that followed proved they had no plans to tell a cohesive and well-structured story. A perfect example for studios to learn from going forward, although I doubt they will. Now, in that same year, another sequel, Jurassic World, was released. The filmmakers were also looking to tell a story to continue the tale of its respected universe, just as The Force Awakens was at the time. However, they did the smart thing by opening the movie in a very different way to how the original Jurassic Park opened. Instead of a vicious raptor attack at night, this sequel opened with a simple shot of the dreaded hybrid dinosaur hatching from an egg. There was no attempt to copy what came before, as the filmmakers were simply building new context around this follow-up story before they even attempted to remake certain set pieces. They were recontextualizing the world with this new open park. And as you might already guess, that is the key element to making a sequel that avoids becoming a mere remake. I suspect as time goes on, Jurassic World will be looked at more favourably as a sequel than those like The Force Awakens, but I might be biased in that opinion.